Let's begin. So, welcome to this wonderful study. Like I said earlier, what motivated me to do this study is there is a hunger, and I have shared it before. I do believe there is a second wave, to call it that, of an awakening taking place during this year specifically because of the fact that we had the signs in the heavens last year. There's so much going on, honestly. There's so much going on. There's always signs in the heavens, by the way, but I believe 2024 was key. Um, Let me tell you a little bit about myself in case you don't know me, you've never joined a study with me or saw a replay or any of that. So, my name is Liz. I began to observe the appointed feast since 2022. I but I want to say that began opening my eyes to his truth and his word in 2020 during the pandemic. And it all began there, honestly, when everything was in shutdown. During the shutdown, I was very like questioning everything, right? I feel like most of us were, right? I was questioning the narratives, the motives, and whatnot, and it led me to open the Bible that I've had for many, many years, and it was just there accumulating dust. I grew up in a Christian church, but I other than what I would hear in Sunday school and later on as an adult and every Sunday service, I really didn't take the time myself to study, as Paul tells Timothy, to study to show myself approved. And that is the year that his Ruach led me to eat the scrolls and open his scriptures and just eat them all up. And it's been such a blessing. I am so grateful for this journey because I believe it was in the middle of 2021 where I came across, obviously I was going through all the conspiracy theories, rabbit holes, and one thing led to another, to the point where from a flat earth biblical teaching led me to someone speaking about the Sabbaths and the feast days. And I was like, that sounds like he's about right with that. Like, but, how do I know more about this? And I don't know about you ladies, feel free to share in the chat or whatever. But when I began to ask these questions in the church, in the regular, I want to call it regular church, nobody had an answer for me. And so I just started searching for myself. I remember fasting. I was so hungry for his word. I remember fasting and praying and asking him, Abba, please lead me to someone who could teach me because I want to know. Like, I am reading Leviticus 23, but like, how do I go about this? And I'll never forget, he led me to this person that till this very day I am very grateful for because he did use this person for that season to guide me to understanding the Moedim, the feast days. And he did that freely, out of his own will and time. Obviously, I know it was the Ruach, but the same way that he was able to edify my life, not only my life, but I had like a Bible study going on at that time, and he joined my Zoom at that time where we were leading that study. So he edified like all of our lives together. And because of that time that he took that day, me and even my husband and then my friends, my brothers, my sisters in Messiah were able to observe the feast for the very first time that year, 2022. And this will be the fourth year. So fourth year, I believe this, yeah, I believe this will be the fourth year observing the feast. So I'm super grateful. And the same way, like the word says, freely give what you freely basically received. That's basically what I'm doing with y'all tonight because, again, it's been life changing for me. It's transformed me. And I get emotional. I'm trying to contain myself. But the fact of the matter is that what is done in my life, I want others to experience it, for the veils to come off and be able to really feast on these days and partake on what Messiah wanted for his church. So having said that brief introduction, I'm gonna go ahead and start. I wanted to, by the way, I had said on Instagram and whatnot that I was going to do a study including going on deeper on Passover, but because the Passover study on its own, it's so deep and rich, I don't want to take away from it. So yes, I'm gonna touch upon it briefly today, but I decided that I will take another day to do maybe like a part two or just a Passover study alone altogether so that I can, so that everybody can understand what this means. But before that, I felt like let's lay the foundation, especially for people like my beautiful friend who have never heard of this. I don't know about you ladies, but I never heard about the Moedim. Like, yes, I would hear about these things, but I heard of it as the Jewish feasts, right? As things that did not pertain to us. I viewed myself as a Gentile believer, which later I understood is a contradiction of term. But now I know better and I want to be able to guide others better. So, the appointed times, what is it and who is it for? Um, the appointed times, as we know, is his feast found in Leviticus 23. And I want to go ahead and start with just that. Um, okay, there you go. With the very first verse of Leviticus 23. And it says, And the Adon spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the children of Yasharallah or Israel, and say to them, The feasts of the Adon, which you shall proclaim to be holy convocations, these are my feasts. And I put that in bold letters because every single time that I would speak to someone about this matter or even ask questions, they would say, oh, that's not for us, that's for the Jewish people. But to me, it was so clear, ladies, when I read verse 1, or actually 2, verse 2 over here saying, these are my feasts, meaning the Most High's feasts. It was very clear to me that this wasn't for a particular nation. These were his. And if they are his and he wants us to do everything pertaining to him, I was already putting question marks here because I'm like, they belong to him. Why aren't we observing it? So that's the first thing that I want to start with. It was very clear to me, and something that I do want to introduce you ladies with is that, and I'm going to read it. I have it here just so it flows better, but we'll talk about it. Okay, so when the bulk of the instructions about the Creator set apart times were given, it was leading up to and following the Israelites being freed from slavery and leaving Egypt. So let's stop right there. So we know that in the Exodus, because that is the first time that we see, well, not the first time, let me clarify that, but at least from my understanding, it had been the first time that was introduced the mention of the feast days, right? In the canon Bible. So in Exodus, this all begins when Israel had gone to Egypt and became enslaved of Egypt, right? Way after about 200, 400 years after Joseph's death, right? Joseph, we know that Joseph was from the tribe of Jacob, meaning his son, and you would have to know the whole story. You would have to go back and read. I'm not going to go into detail of everything that happened, but basically, Joseph had the grace of the Most High to lead his people into Egypt and govern there, being placed in a place of authority. And because of that, at that time, the Israelites in the Egyptian nation had riches and abundance and Abba's grace with them, right? However, after Joseph's death, like I mentioned, not right away, but years after years after years, they became enslaved to Egypt because Egypt was afraid, or the Pharaoh, let's specify, the Pharaoh became afraid that Israel might take over, right? Because they were becoming like a multitude of people and a very powerful people. And they feared their Elohim, right? Their Most High, their God, right? And so because of that, they put them in this yoke and slavery. But the Most High had a covenant that he had done with Abraham all the way in Genesis, which was a blood ratified covenant. And he knew that these people had to be rescued from that slavery. So the very first step, and I want to point out the menorah because the menorah is very symbolic of the feasts. The very first step of this redemption plan was the Passover feast, okay? And that is when it's mentioned in the book of Exodus. So again, I want to continue here. At that point, Israel consisted of all the 12 tribes united, and all the tribes were present in Egypt and then in the wilderness. We know that through the means of the Passover, they ended up in the wilderness. And in the wilderness, they remained there until they made it to the promised land. But again, the instructions were given to all the tribes. And I want to make sure you guys understand it was not only for the people of Judah, which we today know as the Jewish people. That is something that has been taught very wrongly throughout all of our generations, I believe. When I came to the truth, I used to think that the Jews, like basically the Israelites were the Jews, right? And not understanding that the Jews or the Jewish people are only from one of the tribes, which is Judah. Or we know later on it's also the Benjamites combined with some of the Levites, but we know that it's just one house, like one kingdom. The rest of the tribes are not Jewish people. That's just to like make that clarification off the bat. However, I do want to clarify this, that there were people among them that were not natural born Israelites. Some Egyptians actually came along with them during the Passover after deciding the Most High was their true God and they wanted to serve him. And how do I know this? Well, we see this in Exodus 12:38. It says, a mixed multitude went up with them also, and flocks and herds and a great deal of livestock. So we know that this took place right smack in the middle of the Passover, when this verse is given there, right? This was given during the details of the Passover and unleavened bread that were been given to Moses for the Israelites to observe the feasts. So notice how, again, going back, it says a mixed multitude went up with them also during the Passover. So I can imagine this. And let's go back a little bit of history, right? I can imagine this. The Egyptians had gone through 10 plagues, I believe, 10 plagues, right? If I'm not mistaken. Being the last one being the death of the firstborn, and that's the one that marked obviously the Passover. However, what I want to point out is that the Egyptians were seeing all of these plagues and were crying out to the Most High. Not all of them, but some of them were, because they saw how the Israelites did not get touched by the last plagues. Like none of them got hurt, specifically with the death plague. So by the death plague, they saw, okay, we believe what you guys have been saying and doing, and we want to go with you. In other words, like, we don't want to stay here under Pharaoh and all of his gods. We want to go and worship your Elohim, your Most High. And so I believe that's what took place here. And so they left Egypt together with the Israelites, with the blood-born Israelites. And I say blood-born Israelites because I do believe that Israel is not a people, a bloodline people per se, but a covenant people, a born-again people, now in the covenant of Messiah, as Paul later states in Romans 11. So again, we see that the instructions about the biblical holidays and other things apply to anyone in Abba's family, which again, Abba's family is anyone who has the desire to obey him and to be born again, having been written now with the written law in their hearts. So the amount of times that his biblical feasts come up should call our attention to the importance of this to our Creator. And we know, like, for example, the Passover alone is mentioned, I believe, over 75 times throughout scriptures. So that alone should make us question, and again, and this is including the New Testament. So it should lead us to question, like, why aren't we observing these things? So, okay. So I put here the word Moedim in Hebrew. Moedim, and you can find that in the Strong's Concordance from the Hebrew 4150, which literally means appointed time, meeting, season, and literally an appointment. And I want to emphasize on literally an appointment because a feast could represent not only, though we do celebrate during the feasts, not all the feasts are we are to celebrate. For instance, we have Day of Atonement, which we know is the only feast or appointed time that we are supposed to afflict our souls, right? Is the day that we repent, that we humble ourselves in front of the Most High for all of our sins, right? And so I did want to clarify that because feast, I know the meaning of it could be like celebration or festivals, but it's more than that. It's more than a celebration or a festival. It's an appointed time or an appointment. So it's important to understand that because everything about his word, Messiah, prophecies, everything, were during an appointed time, which it's very interesting because from the beginning of times, we see that. So any questions up to this point? Just want to check the chat really quick, make sure I'm not missing anything. Okay. So we have Leviticus 23. Again, we're going to be reading off Leviticus 23 a lot because that is the, though we do see it again, like in Numbers and again repeated in Deuteronomy, the whole of the feast is found in Leviticus 23. That is when it's presented by Moses to the congregation. So we see verse 3, it begins with the Sabbaths, right? And it says, 6 days shall work be done, but the 7th day is a Sabbath of solemn rest, a holy convocation. You shall do no work on it. It is the Sabbath of the Adon in your dwellings, in all of your dwellings, right? So I do want to show this, and I want to also show this same precept, but I have it here in the NKJV. I like the NKJV, for example, splits it into little sections, right? So this is the reason why I want to show you this. So the verse we just read was this one, verse 3. And we see that this is just for the Sabbath day. But I want you to observe something because the Sabbath day is telling you it's a day of solemn rest and a holy convocation. In other words, no work on it. Like no work. You are not by yourself. In other words, you don't work. You don't labor for money, right? So that is literally what the Sabbath day means. Whenever you see a Sabbath, you see holy convocation, you see no work on it, you see a day of solemn, like I said, a day of solemn rest. And I do want to show you guys, for example, that this is a Strong's Concordance in Hebrew, by the way. Where did I? Okay, hold on. I just wanted to see something because, it's because this is a phrase. Okay, let me see where it comes from. Okay, I promise you I had this, but now I can't find it. The part where it shows the Sabbath connected to the Moedim. Let me see something again. Well, yeah, you're gonna find it there. But anyway, I don't want to confuse you guys. Let me just so for example, you see here in the Strongs that this Sabbath, it's also including Day of Atonement. But we're gonna see together that is more than just a Day of Atonement. It's every feast day, literally. That's what I was gonna try to show you through this Strongs right here on Blue Letter Bible. But I have it on my slides regardless. So let's go back and where did I, I'm like, where did my Canva go? All right, so again, we saw this about the Sabbath. So I try to put this together as best as I could so that you guys can follow me in every step of the way. If this is too much, please tell me, slow down. Let me see what you're talking about. Let me see it for myself. I am gladly willing to do that. So again, feast or appointed times, it's Moedim in Hebrew. And Moedim, that's in plural because the singular is Moed, right? So Moedim meaning his feasts or appointed times or appointed days. So it literally equals holy convocation and day of rest. That's what I literally just showed you in the verse 3 where it speaks on the Sabbath day. So if you notice, the rest of the feasts that are written or ordained within that same chapter, chapter 23, you're going to notice the same exact things for every feast days, like the same characteristics. So, and I grouped them by numbers here, by the way. So 1 and 2, this means Passover and unleavened bread. 3, this is for Shavuot or Pentecost. 4, and by the way, 3, you will also see it as Feast of Weeks, Pentecost, Shavuot. So just there's many different ways you'll see it. 4, this will be for Feast of Trumpets. Let me go to the next slide so you can see 5. This would be Sukkot. Sorry, not Sukkot. Day of Atonement. 6, this would be Sukkot or Feast of Tabernacles. And 7 would be the great 8th day. So we're going to break it down. So we have the first one, which is found in Leviticus 23, verse 5 through 8. So on the 14th day of the first month at twilight is the Adon's Passover. And on the 15th day of the same month is the Feast of Unleavened Bread to the Adon. So we see 2 feasts here, which is the first day. By the way, Passover would indicate the first day of unleavened bread. And then this one over here would indicate the last day of unleavened bread, because we have that only 2 days are holy convocations. And that's what I want you guys to understand. It's not, even though it's a week long of unleavened bread, it's only 2 days of holy convocations. You're going to read it with me now. You'll see. So verse 6, and on the 15th day of the same month is the Feast of Unleavened Bread to the Adon. 7 days you must eat unleavened bread. On the first day you shall have a holy convocation, which is what I was talking about. On the first day you shall do no customary work on it. Sounds like the Shabbat, right? Like the Sabbath. Verse 8, but you shall offer an offering made by fire to the Adon for 7 days. The 7th day shall be a holy convocation. You shall do no customary work on it. So again, you have 2 Sabbath days. So you see what I meant with Sabbath equals Moed is exactly the same thing. It's exactly the same concept. No work, day of rest, and a holy convocation, which other translations would read as sacred assembly or holy assembly. It's the same thing. Then we see this part right here. I do want to take my time to explain this, because when I first started learning about the feast days, I was taught that the first fruits was a feast. And you're going to see how scriptures kind of debunks that. First fruits served as a transitioning to count the 50 days to Shavuot. That is the purpose of the first fruits. But it's not a feast day per se. Can we observe it? Can we regard the day when we arrive to it? Absolutely. You can say today is the day of first fruits according to scriptures. But it does not declare it to be a Sabbath or a Moed. That's the difference. And you're going to see why. So for example, verse 15, I didn't put the whole paragraph because it's too long here, but we could see it together on Blue Letter Bible. So we begin in 15, just so you see what I'm talking about. And you shall count for yourselves from the day after the Sabbath, from the day that you brought the sheaf of the wave offering, 7 Sabbaths shall be completed. And those 7 Sabbaths are the 50 days. You're going to see. Verse 16, count 50 days to the day after the 7th Sabbath. Then you shall offer a new grain offering to the Adon. So verse 20, it says, the priest shall wave them with the bread of the first fruits as a wave offering before the Most High, with the 2 lambs. They shall be holy to the Most High for the priest. And you shall proclaim on the same day that it is a holy convocation to you. You shall do no customary work on it. It shall be a statute forever in all your dwellings throughout your generations. So I'm going to go back to Blue Letter Bible so maybe it's more clear to you that way, where it speaks about, because here in my NKJV, it groups it as a feast. Again, that's how we've been taught. But when you read the first fruits together with Feast of Weeks, which is Shavuot over here, you're going to see that it's all one big thing. For example, in the paragraphs that you have on the first fruits, you're not going to see a holy convocation. You're going to see the rules for them to wave the sheaf before the Adon, about the offering and whatnot. And it doesn't say anywhere, it shall be a day of rest to you, it shall be a holy convocation. It only mentions the Sabbath only because you're supposed to count on the day after the Sabbath or wave the offering the day after the Sabbath. But it does not say this day of first fruit, for example, shall be a holy convocation or nor a solemn day of rest or no work therein. So you see what I mean. And if you continue, you see that verse 15, it starts, and you shall count for yourselves. So that and goes together with this. So these two sections over here, they are one. They are supposed to be one. First fruits is not a feast. So I would take that out and just leave first fruits leading to Feast of Weeks, which is why I showed you guys. And then it leads to the Holy Convocation now being the Feast of Weeks, which is Pentecost in Greek and in Hebrew Shavuot. So I just wanted to point that out. There's a whole beautiful study I also have well, I don't have it on YouTube, but I do have it written. If you guys want it, I can share it with you. I do have it in bilingual form, I believe also. But anyhow, let's continue. Oops, no, I don't want to go here yet. Let's go back here. So that is the Feast of Shavuot. Any questions to this point? Everyone is okay? Understanding? Let me know if I'm going too fast, okay? All right, so the fourth feast, we have the feast of the seventh month, which is trumpets. So we have speak to the children. I'm sorry, let me see why this is not, okay, there. Oops. Okay. Speak to the children of Israel, saying, in the seventh month, on the first day of the month, you shall have a Sabbath rest, a memorial of blowing of trumpets, a holy convocation. You shall do no customary work on it, and you shall offer an offering made by fire to the Most High. So you see right there, off the bat, is speaking of Feast of Trumpets, giving you a Sabbath day of rest, no customary work on it, and a holy convocation, which automatically turns it into a feast or a Sabbath. Again, I'm going to repeat myself over and over and over. Sabbath equals Moed, meaning feast days are equal to Sabbath days. And I need you guys to understand that. Something that I am going to say, if you don't get it, maybe some of you already know this, but if this is new to you and it's like, wow, this is a lot, where is she going with all of this? Don't feel bad. I didn't get it all once, like right away, all at once, I meant. It took me some time and studying and actually seeing it put to practice to understand it. So like I always tell my children, repetition is key. And I also tell them that whatever you hear now, it might not make sense, but later on, you're going to remember and be like, oh yeah, and it's gonna click, okay? That's how the word is, especially when you've been taught basically wrong your whole entire life. We have to start from scratch. And literally, like, it's like we have to unlearn, which that in itself is like a lot of work. Unlearning, it's work. And then we have to relearn the right way. So don't feel bad or ashamed that you don't get these things right away, because I promise you, you will. His word is perfect, and it promises you and me that his Ruach HaKodesh, his Holy Spirit, will lead us to all truth. We just have to search out the matter. And again, we have the fifth feast, which would be the Day of Atonement, which again, I told you guys at the beginning, this is not a celebration, but a day of afflicting of our souls. And we have, it says also, the 10th day of this 7th month shall be the Day of Atonement. It shall be a holy convocation for you. You shall afflict your souls. So they're very specific here. Afflicting of your souls is the only time you see that, and that's during the feast of Day of Atonement. It says, an offering made by fire to the Most High. And you shall do no work on that same day. So very specific already. Holy convocation, no work, right? And then it continues. For it is the Day of Atonement to make atonement for you before the Most High, your Elohim. For any person who is not afflicted in soul on that same day shall be cut off from his people. And any person who does any work on that same day, that person I will destroy from among his people. You shall do no manner of work. It shall be a statute forever throughout your generations in all your dwellings. It shall be to you a Sabbath of solemn rest. So you see how specific they are? That's what I wanted like to reiterate over and over. And you shall afflict your souls on the 9th day of the month at evening. From evening to evening, you shall celebrate your Sabbath. I also want to make this observation here. The Day of Atonement is the only feast day or moed that will specify that it is from evening to evening. All other Sabbaths don't say that. All other feast days don't say that. It literally says evening to evening only for the Day of Atonement. And I believe this is where Judaism gets perhaps that Sabbath days are from evening to evening. I want to say maybe that's where they get that from. But I do want to make that observation because nowhere else is it specified that we are to start an evening to evening. Messiah taught us that a day has 12 hours, which is from sunrise to sundown. And so if you are to observe a day, my understanding it's during the day. But that's a whole other topic that goes into the calendar and whatnot, and we're not going to get in all of those details tonight. I'm going to briefly on the surface touch upon a couple of things, but not very deep, not tonight anyhow. But anyhow, I did want to specify that because that is very clear to me that that's the only moed that has that observation right there. I did want to also say that, for example, let me see, I just saw it right now. Oh, here, it says on verse 31, you shall do no manner of work. I would like to take more time and look at other translations to see how it renders that sentence. But I did notice that at least in the NKJV, it makes like a little bit of difference between the other specifics on work and the Day of Atonement. Like, for example, all the other ones, look at verse 35 down here for Feast of Tabernacles. All of them say this, do no customary work on it, at least on the NKJV translation, right? And all of them have said this, except that on Day of Atonement, it says you shall do no manner of work. Again, I would have to confirm other translations, but from this translation alone, what this means to me is that the Day of Atonement is the only day that you're not to do any type of work, meaning no cooking, no cleaning, no nothing. The other feast days, it is my understanding, it is anything that is paid labor that you're not to do. Because we see, for example, during the Passover, that there is there's details given that you are to only do, like, prepare the food for that day. So we kind of can conclude from that it is allowed for us to cook on a Sabbath day, as long, of course, as it is not burdensome to you. I've had some sisters tell me, like, oh, I see you cook on the Sabbath day, but to me that's work, that's labor, like that's too much. And my advice to them is like, listen, if it's way too much for you, then meal prep the day before and take the day off on the Sabbath day, right? However, I do want to say this, I do take joy on making meals for my family. It's not burdensome at all to me. I'm speaking on, of myself here. And I did try before the whole meal prep thing, and to me that was becoming more burdensome because I didn't have enough time the day before to prepare for a large family for meals of that day and then the next day as well. So it was becoming very burdensome, and I realized like it was taking away from my Sabbath. It was taking away, like I would wake up exhausted on a Sabbath. And so again, everyone is different and you do what works for you. But I do want to specify that I do not believe, for example, that cooking is not allowed on a Sabbath. And I have a question from Leslie. She's saying, what does it mean to kindle fire? I love cooking, but the verse gets me. I am gonna try to get to that. That isn't during the Passover, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. But let me finish this, and I'm gonna get back to that. Hopefully, I can cover that. But I'm gonna point to you what that literally means. Um, you know, precept upon precept. Not that I'm interpreting it for you, but like scriptures, how it interprets itself and what I believe it means. Um, so okay, let's continue. So we have the next feast, which is, like I said, the sixth feast or Feast of Tabernacles. Normally we have that Feast of Tabernacles is the seventh feast, again, because we've been taught that Feast of First Fruits, like, I mean, the first fruits is a feast, right? But I'm doing a different breakdown to you guys to, according to how the word breaks it down, right? Again, including the no customary work on it, holy convocation, and a day of rest, a Shabbat, a day of Sabbath rest, right? So we have verse 34, speak to the children of Israel, saying, the 15th day of this seventh month shall be the Feast of Tabernacles for 7 days to the Adon. On the first day there shall be a holy convocation. You shall do no customary work on it. For 7 days you shall offer an offering made by fire to the Most High. So we have that the first day, it's very specific. On the first day, I should have put that in bold too, there shall be a holy convocation. So it's not the whole week. A lot of people think that Feast of Tabernacles is Sabbath days all week. Yes, you have your weekly Sabbaths between every time you have a week-long event, but the Feast of Tabernacles is just a 1 day Sabbath. Like, it's only the first day of Shabbat. Does that make sense? The first day is a holy convocation, and obviously no work on it. And then we have on the 8th day, which I believe is the last feast, you shall have a holy convocation, and you shall offer an offering made by fire to the Most High. It is a sacred assembly, and you shall do no customary work on it. So here we see sacred assembly. Sacred assembly is the same as holy convocation. So that, again, another Shabbat. And yes, I do understand that the 8th day is within the week of Tabernacles. But if you go deeper into the what every feast represents, you understand that the 8th day is a feast on its own. Because for example, Sukkot, what it represents is when Messiah comes and tabernacles with us, meaning the millennial reign. And the 8th day is that last day of the millennial reign, is when we go on to eternity. Even the eighth number, the number 8, I mean, representing infinity. It's all not by coincidence, right? There's, again, every feast, I feel like I should just do a study on each one so you see how deep it goes. But yeah, we're not doing each one individually today. I wanted to give you an overall picture so you can begin to understand before you observe, or if you've already observed, so you can observe it even with more understanding. So again, I mentioned before that I believe the menorah is so valuable with so many things. It doesn't only represent the light that we are to shine. Obviously, we know the menorah, as written in the book of Revelation, represents the church, the 7 churches, or his church, the bride. But we know that it also represents like the 7 steps that he gave us to save his bride, the 7 steps to keep his bride in a narrow path and to make it so that she could make it onto the wedding supper. And I love this. I remember I saw this back in 2021, and I copied it, and I love the fact that it includes here the weekly Sabbath in the middle, because the middle holds everything. The weekly Sabbath being part of all of his feast days. When we speak about his appointed feasts, is not just Passover, unleavened bread, Pentecost, trumpets, atonement, tabernacles, and 8th day. Is also every weekly Sabbath. And we know that we are commanded to celebrate it, again, because it's all about our Messiah. It's all about him. We know that the Messiah was the Passover lamb. He is also the unleavened bread, which means he had no sin, as well as the resurrection, which is the first fruits, and left us with his Holy Spirit during Shavuot. we know that first fruits and the Holy Spirit, it goes together, because his resurrection led to 50 days later him leaving his, well, not 50 days later after the resurrection, but 50 days, well, yeah, I would have to go back to that and count, but I know it's 50 days after he ascended, right? That we have the or 40 days after he ascended. I know that you count, when you count, is 50 altogether, from the ascending of Messiah to the giving of his ruach, of his spirit, leading to Shavuot or Pentecost at the upper room with the disciples. So it all connects, and I believe again this first fruits and Shavuot, it's all one, beautifully intertwined together. And then we have the Feast of Trumpets, which, again, I'm going to say something really quick. These first three have already taken place, okay? We know that when he died during Passover, because he was the Passover lamb. We know that he was the unleavened bread because he was the Passover lamb that was without spot and blemish. He was sinless. He was spotless, right? And we know that he gave his Ruach HaKodesh already. When he ascended unto heaven, he left us with his helper, which is his Holy Spirit. So the Feast of Trumpets, Day of Atonement, and Tabernacles, and the eighth day, those are the ones that have yet not been fulfilled and that we are awaiting for. Feast of Trumpets, or Yom Teruah in Hebrew, is when he returns. It's that, like in the parable of the wedding, or better yet, in the parable of the 10 virgins, where it says, and at the sound of the trumpet, there was like a loud noise. It doesn't say trumpet, but it leads to understand that it was a trumpet. We know a shofar will be blasted at his return, right? That said, the bridegroom is coming. So we know he comes back on Yom Teruah. We have the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur in Hebrew, which signifies a day of judgment. Obviously not a good day, but we are to be ready for that day, the day of judgment. Tabernacles, or Sukkot in Hebrew, is when Messiah then comes after the day of judgment to tabernacle with us, like I mentioned before, during the millennial reign. And lastly, we have the eighth day, which is when we go on into eternity with him. And like I said, it's all about him. It's literally all about him. That's what the feasts are for. Before I go to this next thing, I do want to show you ladies something. Because of the fact that I spoke to you guys about feast days being the same as the weekly Sabbath days, meaning having the same importance and the same meaning to him. And I want to do a few precept connections throughout. There's so many, honestly. It's overwhelming when you go and you click on the Strong's Concordance, like Sabbath, throughout the Old Testament, New Testament. It's overwhelming how many connections you're going to get just with the Sabbath. But I try to include a few just so you see how many, not just how many times it's mentioned, because we won't see how many times it's mentioned, but so you see the connections with the Sabbath day. So I kind of try to pick and choose the most not important ones. They're all important, but you know what I mean. I guess the ones that can add clarification for the purpose of this study. So the very first time that we see mention of the Sabbath day, we see it on Genesis chapter 2, verses 2 to 3. And I have it here on the ESV version. I decided to go with that version because it's more clear to many. So, and on the seventh day, the Most High finished his work that he had done. And he rested on the seventh day from all his work that he had done. So the Most High blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it the Most High rested from all his work that he had done in creation. And why do I want to show the very first time that the Sabbath is mentioned? Because the Sabbath is mentioned in Eden with the creation. Even way before the fall of man, even before the Mosaic law, how many like to call it. It's funny because many people like to say, oh, but the Sabbath is that's for the Jews. That's like the Jewish law or whatever, or the law of Moses. Not understanding that this wasn't Moses's law. This is the Most High. This is our Creator's law. This is what he ordained from the very beginning of creation. It's on the very second chapter of our book, the very first book of our Bibles, right? So I just wanted to point that one out. And then we see the first time that he brings it to Moses. Well, not the first time. The first time he brings it to Moses is actually Exodus 16, I think, or even Exodus 12 during the Passover. But anyway, um, this is the when he's giving it already in written form in the tablets of stone in the Ten Commandments. So let's read it. Exodus 28 through 11. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work. But the seventh day is a Sabbath up to the Adon your Elohim. On it you shall not do any work, you or your son or your daughter, your male servant or your female servant, or your livestock, or the sojourner who is within your gates. For in 6 days the Most High made heaven and earth, like we just read on Genesis, right? The sea and all that is in them, and rested on the seventh day. Therefore, the Most High blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. So, what we read on Genesis, he now brings it back into a tablet of stone and tells us this is part of your commandments. And it's the only commandment, by the way, that begins with remember. I wonder why, right? Because he knew we would forget. Exodus 31, 14 and 17. You shall keep the Sabbath because it is holy for you. Everyone who profanes it shall be put to death. Whoever does any work on it, that soul shall be cut off from among his people. It is a sign forever between me and the people of Israel that in 6 days the Most High made heaven and earth, and on the seventh day he rested and was refreshed. I want to say something really quick. I know many people will say like, oh, no one is keeping the Sabbath today and nobody's dying. Yes, we know back in the Old Testament, people would die on the spot. If you've been doing any studies with me, you've heard me say this already. The Old Testament, things were very physical. It was like, I tell you to do it, you do it, and it comes to pass like in front of your eyes. After Messiah comes and we are born again in his Ruach, in his spirit, it is all spiritual now. Okay? So everything moving forward is spiritual. So this death that he's speaking of there, guess what? It's still happening, but spiritual. I don't know how many of you, once you begin to open your eyes to scriptures, realize how dead you were, how far away from him you were. I don't know about you, but I was so dead. Even in churchianity, even like I was doing things for him to the best of my understanding, but I still felt like a huge disconnect because I did not understand his scriptures. I didn't know him because of that. And so my relationship with him was very vague, right? So understanding now the fact that I was not keeping the commandments, though it was by ignorance, I was still spiritually dead. So, yes, all of this still applies, but in a spiritual sense. And later, after the day of judgment, or during the day of judgment, or after the millennial reign, when he judges again the earth, we shall see truly who's going to make it unto eternity. So, it won't be so spiritual then, though we will be spiritual beings, but you know what I mean. Exodus 34:21. 6 days you shall work, but on the seventh day you shall rest. In plowing time and in harvest you shall rest. Exodus 16:23. He said to them, this is what the Most High has commanded. Tomorrow is a day of solemn rest, a holy Sabbath to the Adon. Bake what you will bake and boil what you will boil, and all that is left over lay aside to be kept till the morning. And a lot of people, again, will use this. I want to make a pause here. I want to use this because this chapter 16, if I'm not mistaken, yes, I remember now. It had to do with them picking up the manna. And if you notice in context, we're not going to read it because then we won't have the time to go through it all. But if you read on the specifics of the manna, they were not to gather manna on the day of the Sabbath, right? So they were to gather double the day before the Sabbath, which was preparation day, right? So they would gather double manna, and then the next day, they didn't have to go and find it. So the whole point of this is that he's telling them tomorrow is a day of solemn rest, a holy Sabbath. Bake what you will bake and boil what you will boil, and all that is left over lay aside to be kept till the morning, because of the fact that tomorrow will be no manna for you to find. And that's Leslie, I don't know if that adds to maybe understanding your question from before, because a lot of people will say, will mix the kindling of fire with this and saying like, oh, it's for you not to cook, and they'll join it with this idea right here. But it is my understanding that what you are to do is not to go and buy food the next day. In other words, the manna wasn't given to them the next day because of the fact that they had to have it already in their homes or in their tents, obviously, the day before. In our case, in our homes the day before. So buy what you need to buy and have it ready. But the next day you could prepare it. You get me? I don't know if you guys are understanding. Okay, glad you got it. I can even go deeper at the end, like by opening the whole chapter 16 and even 12 to connect it. But let's keep it rolling and then we'll get back to that, okay? So Numbers 10:10, we have on the day of your gladness also, and at your appointed feasts, and at the beginning of your months, you shall blow the trumpets over your burnt offerings and over the sacrifices of your peace offerings. They shall be a reminder um they shall be a reminder of you before your Elohim. I am the Most High. So here he's talking about appointed feasts, right? Telling you at the beginning of your months, and obviously because we know we are to blow the trumpets, right? The shofar, which is the ram's horn, according to scriptures. But you see right there that these appointed feasts are together with the blowing of trumpets. It's not just the Feast of Trumpets. I think that's why I added that one there. Yes, I do think that's why I added that one there. I was looking for, I think I left the part where it says it's a Sabbath day. Maybe I did. But anyhow, let's continue. Deuteronomy 5:12 through 15. Observe the Sabbath day to keep it holy, as the Adon your Elohim commanded you. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work. But the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Adon. On it you shall not do any work, you or your son or your daughter or your male servant or your female servant or your ox or your donkey or any of your livestock or the sojourner who is within your gates, that your male servant and your female servant may rest as well as you. You shall remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and the Adon your Elohim brought you out from there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore the Most High your Elohim commanded you to keep the Sabbath day. And I love to always go back to Deuteronomy, because I believe Deuteronomy, so if in case you don't know, Deuteronomy is the last book of the Torah, written by Moses. But Deuteronomy was given to the children born within the wilderness. And those were the ones that actually made it into the promised land. And he had to basically go back and reestablish and remind him of all the laws and all the statutes and commandments and ordinances, so that they can come back in agreement with it and in covenant with the Most High. So here it makes a distinction that also the sojourner who is within your gates is also to keep the Sabbath day. So this is not only for the Israelites. So we see in Mark 2:27 through 28, and he said to them, the Sabbath was made for men and not men for the Sabbath. So the Son of Man is the Adon, even of the Sabbath. And this is Messiah speaking. And we know he would always say this when the Pharisees would come and try to get him breaking supposedly the Sabbath. But what he was breaking was the traditions of men, the leaven basically that they had added to the day. And he's telling them, listen, this is not for you to be burdened. This is a day of rest. It's made for men, not men for the Sabbath. So Isaiah 58:13 and 14, if you turn back your foot from the Sabbath, from doing your pleasure on my holy day, and call the Sabbath a delight, and the holy day of the Adon honorable, if you honor it, not going your own ways, or seeking your own pleasure, or talking idly, then you shall take delight in the Adon, and I will make you ride on the heights of the earth. I will feed you with the heritage of Jacob your father, for the mouth of the Most High has spoken. I love this precept. It is such a beautiful promise. And one thing that I want to remind you, ladies, is the Sabbath day is not only the weekly Sabbath, it's every appointed time that has together in it a holy convocation, no work therein, and a Sabbath day of rest. So every feast day, every weekly Sabbath is what this is referring to. It's not just the weekly Sabbath. And notice something here. It says here, if you honor it, not going your own ways or seeking your own pleasure or talking idly. So I love this part because many times I've come across people who keep the Sabbath day, observe them religiously, literally, or every feast day. um, but their hearts are not bearing the fruits of the spirit. In other words, their flesh is evident. Um, they're even seeking desire of their flesh on Sabbath days, and this is not to judge others. This is to point out something. Observing feast days and Sabbath days is not for you to have a checklist and say, done. Here, Abba, look at me keeping your Sabbath days. Look at me posting about how holy I am. It has nothing to do with that. It's about delighting in Him. It's about finding pleasure, like He says, in His holy day. It's about valuing this day so much so that He enjoys seeing you resting in that day. Does is that what, like, because a lot of times I feel like we ourselves are a stumbling block upon other people because we make it look like such a burden and such a, like, oh, you have to do this. Yes, scriptures does teach us that we have to do it, but we shouldn't tell people to do it if their hearts are not in it, because if not, what you are raising or rising up is a bunch of Pharisees. Remember, the Pharisees kept the Sabbath days and the feast days, all of them. They would go to Jerusalem and observe all the feast days. And what did Messiah call them? Whitewashed tombs, right? Hypocrites, all the names, you name it. So let's make sure that we are not observing these things because we want to fit in with a group of people, or say, look, I'm doing this thing, or even come up to the Most High saying, like, look, I did the list that you commanded me to do. Because at the end of the day, it's a matter of the heart. I believe there's many people who perhaps don't observe the right way or on the right calendar. And I say this with the fear of Abba. And I do believe these people will make it. Because at the end of the day, it's whatever knowledge they've gotten, He's going to see that combined with the posture of their hearts. Is that to say that, oh, because I love Him, I don't need to find out whether I'm in the right calendar or not? No, I'm not saying that at all. Because I do believe that if you know better, you do better, right? And if He's giving us the ability to study to show ourselves approved, we're going to try to, by the lead of His Ruach, of His Holy Spirit, to know all things. But it's not to say that we have it all figured out. And it's not to walk with our heads higher than others, thinking like, oh, we got it. Because you don't know if that person has a more surrendered posture in their hearts than you do. So let's be careful with that. Let's model by example, by Messiah's example. Well, how did He model this, right? So let's see what He said in Hebrews 4. I love this, by the way. If you have a chance, if you didn't, I know some of you were in my Hebrew study, but I have it on YouTube. You can catch it. I go into, I break down this in like 3-4 week study, I think it was. But there's so much here, but I'm just going to read it for now. Hebrews 4:4 and then 9 through 11. We have, for He has somewhere spoken of the seventh day in this way. And the Most High rested on the seventh day from all His works. So then there remains a Sabbath rest for the people of the Most High. For whoever has entered the Most High's rest has also rested from his works as the Most High did from His. Verse 11, let us therefore strive to enter that rest, so that no one may fall by the same sword of disobedience. And again, I go into depth with this, but I do want to say this. This is speaking of the rest that we find in the millennial reign. However, he is bringing it back to what we are to do in this present life, which is why he's speaking of the seventh day, how he rested from his works on the seventh day, and that there remains a Sabbath rest for the people of the Most High. We know that this is the hope that we have to enter into that eternal rest, right? However, it says, let us therefore strive to enter that rest. And then it says, so that no one may fall by the same sword of disobedience. What was that disobedience? His people not keeping his Sabbath days, his commandments. That is what he is referring to here, the author of Hebrews. So I just wanted to point that out. It's a beautiful book, such a beautiful study to do. Anyway, we know, I already read this one, the commandment, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. And we have Ezekiel, such a beautiful book. Again, Ezekiel 20, verses 12 through 24. This is the Most High speaking through Ezekiel. Moreover, I gave them my Sabbaths as a sign. We see a repetition of this, as a sign between me and them, that they might know that I am the Most High who sanctifies them. But the house of Israel rebelled against me in the wilderness. Remember what I said in Hebrews right here? It's this disobedience, right? They rebelled against me in the wilderness. They did not walk in my statutes, but rejected my rules, by which if a person does them, he shall live. And my Sabbaths they greatly profaned. Then I said, I would pour out my wrath upon them in the wilderness to make a full end of them. But I acted for the sake of my name, that it should not be profaned, in the sight of the nations, in whose sight I had brought them out. Verse 15. Moreover, I swore to them in the wilderness that I would not bring them into the land that I had given them, a land flowing with milk and honey, and most glorious of all lands, because they rejected my rules and did not walk in my statutes, and profaned my Sabbaths, for their heart went after their idols. Nevertheless, my eyes spared them, and I did not destroy them or make a full end of them in the wilderness. And I said to their children in the wilderness, do not walk in the statutes of your fathers, which is what I was speaking of in Deuteronomy, nor keep their rules, nor defile yourselves with their idols. I am the Adon your Elohim. Walk in my statutes and be careful to obey my rules and keep my Sabbaths holy, that they may be a sign between me and you, that you may know that I am the Adon your Elohim. But the children rebelled against me. They did not walk in my statutes and were not careful to obey my rules, by which if a person does them, he shall live. They profaned my Sabbaths. Then I said I would pour out my wrath upon them and spend my anger against them in the wilderness. But I withheld my hand and acted for the sake of my name, that it should not be profaned in the sight of the nations, in whose sight I had brought them out. Moreover, I swore to them in the wilderness that I would scatter them among the nations and disperse them through the countries, because they had not obeyed my rules, but had rejected my statutes and profaned my Sabbaths, and their eyes were set on their fathers' idols. Oof. I don't know about you ladies, but this is deep. This goes to us today. It's a memorial of what happened to our forefathers. It is for us not to do, again, what Hebrews says. Let us therefore strive to enter that rest, so that no one may fall by the same sword of disobedience. And what was that disobedience? What was that disobedience? They did not walk in the statutes, their rules. They did not carefully obey him or keep his Sabbaths holy. So you see the importance of this appointed days. This is not just to say I am keeping Shabbat. This is not just to sound cute on Instagram and say Shabbat Shalom, look at me blowing, or not blowing up, lining up my menorah. Guys, it goes much more than that. It's a sign, guys, a sign between him and us. This is how he marks us. Remember the mark that he speaks of in Deuteronomy between the frontlets of our eyes and on our right hand? And it goes straight into our heart, because this, the frontness of our eyes, it's a representation of our minds, and we know that whatever we think of comes from our heart. So if his commandments, if his perfect instructions, his Torah is inscribed in our hearts, it means it's inscribed in our minds. It's what we think of, and what we think of is what we do. What we do, we should do because it comes from within, not because it's something that is forced. So I pray that as you are watching this, as you are studying together with me, that this is revealed to you, that you want to please him and you want to be marked by him. Revelation says that he comes for those that are marked. It says, hurt not the earth. I'm paraphrasing. I don't know it by heart, but it says something like, hurt not the earth, or, the land, or whatever, until you seal. Until you seal. And he's telling that to one of his angels. Until you seal my people. And how does he seal us? When we are in covenant with him. It is a blood ratified covenant from the beginning of times, from Abraham all the way through Messiah. So understanding that this is nothing to do with Moses. Moses was just the facilitator. It goes back to Genesis. This is the Most High's desire. So understand that the feast days is not only for the Jews, like people always say. The Jew or the Jewish people, it's only a branch of the Israelites. It's not all of them. I have another study on that. I'm not sure if I have it on YouTube. I would have to look it up. I know during one of my Matthew studies, I believe during chapter, well, I want to say 9 or 10. No, it's actually 10. Chapter 10. If you have time to look it up, I go into more depth in the understanding who is the lost sheep that Messiah was speaking about, and what is the difference with the house of Israel and the house of Judah. But understanding that the house of Judah is only one group of people, and that at the end of the day, it has nothing to do with bloodline. This has to do with being born again into his covenant. Israel is a people in covenant. It's a spiritual people. It's not a bloodline people. Because we know that those that disobeyed are cut off. As clearly we've been reading throughout all of these precepts, that when you don't do these things, you are cut off. And not just do them to do them, but meaning being born again. If you don't accept Messiah to begin with, then you are cut off. You get me? So let's continue. Here I'm going to read a couple of precepts showing how Messiah actually observed the Sabbath day, or even after he was resurrected, it continued being observed. So we have Luke 4:16, and he came to Nazareth where he had been brought up, meaning Messiah. And as was his custom, he went to the synagogue on the Sabbath day, and he stood up to read. We also see Luke 23:56. Then they returned and prepared spices and ointments on the Sabbath. On the Sabbath, they rested according to the commandments. Just wanted to point that out. This is New Testament scriptures. Luke 13, 10 and 17. Now he was teaching in one of the synagogues on the Sabbath, Messiah again. And behold, there was a woman who had a disabling spirit for 18 years. She was bent over and could not fully straighten herself. When Yahshua saw her, he called her over and said to her, "Woman, you are freed from your disability." And he laid his hands on her. And immediately she was made straight, and she glorified the Most High. But the ruler of the synagogue, indignant because Yahshua had healed on the Sabbath, said to the people, "There are 6 days in which work ought to be done. Come on those days and be healed, and not on the Sabbath day." Then the Adon answered him, "You hypocrites, does not each of you on the Sabbath untie his ox or his donkey from the manger and lead it away to water it? And ought not this woman, a daughter of Abraham, whom Satan bound for 18 years, be loosed from this bond on the Sabbath day?" As he said these things, all his adversaries were put to shame, and all the people rejoiced at the glorious things that were done by him. Our Mashiach is the man. I'm just going to say that. But I wanted to point out the fact that healing is not contradicting his commandments within the Torah. Healing is doing good on the Sabbath. Nowhere in scriptures did we read, do not do good on a Sabbath day of solemn rest. It says, do not do any work and have a holy convocation, which is basically what he was doing. And so he calls them hypocrite. And not only that, it's funny because we see here on a verse, like, where is it? Where is it? Where they start saying, oh, here, the people said, there are 6 days, the people meaning the Pharisees, right? There are 6 days in which work ought to be done. Come on those days and be healed. Since when is healing work? So that's just what I wanted to point out. Messiah never went against his own commandments that he himself gave with his own finger. He is the same yesterday, today, and forever, as written in scriptures. So it's not to say that he came and made something new now after he was on earth. He just came and was against all of the traditions of men, which clearly this was one of them. So we also see now Messiah speaking of the end times. We know that chapter 24 is a chapter where they come up to him and the disciples ask him, what are the signs of the end times? And we know that, well, I included 8:19, but 19 is not what I wanted to put here. It says, and Allah's for women who are pregnant and for those who are nursing infants in those days. It's basically here, verse 20. Pray that your flight may not be in winter or on the Sabbath. Again, Messiah is speaking about his return. His return meaning end times, meaning our times, right? Why would he say, pray that it may not be winter or the Sabbath if the Sabbath is done away with? If that's just for the people in the Old Testament or the Jews. Just wanted to point that out because that's a good one there too. Matthew 21 verse 8, 28 verse 1, I said it backwards. Now after the Sabbath, this is after Messiah resurrects, by the way. Now after the Sabbath, toward the dawn of the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to see the tomb. And again, Messiah had already died. This is when the two Marys go to see him in the tomb, right? If it's true that the Sabbath was done away with, that these commandments were done away with, why would the disciples wait after the Sabbath was over to go out to the tomb? Wouldn't they be like, oh, Messiah was with us, he told us not to, that it doesn't matter, this is done away with? He nailed it to the cross, literally. He just died, right? No, we see that they were clearly observing the day, and then they went to see him. Just wanted to point that out there too. So Acts 18 verse 4, and he reasoned in the synagogue every Sabbath and tried to persuade Jews and Greek. And now I'm pointing out this is Paul. And I'm going to go more into depth with Paul in a little bit, because they love to bring back Paul into the pulpit whenever we speak of feast days and Sabbath days or any sort of commandments. So this is Paul now, every Sabbath day. Acts 17 verse 2, and Paul went in, as was his custom, and on 3, not 1, but 3 Sabbath days, he reasoned with them from the scriptures. Why didn't he reason with them on other days? No, as it was his custom, on 3 Sabbath days. So clearly he was observing the day. Isaiah 56:2, blessed is the man who does this, and the son of man who holds it fast, who keeps the Sabbath, not profaning it, and keeps his hand from doing any evil. Amen. Ezekiel 46 verse 1, thus says the Most High, the gate of the inner court that faces east shall be shut on the 6 working days, but on the Sabbath day it shall be opened, and on the day of the new moon it shall be opened. By the way, this portion of Ezekiel has to do with the New Jerusalem. A beautiful study done by my sister Stephanie, if you want to go check it out. But there's so many things still happening during the millennial reign that it will blow your mind how these things are still in effect, even in the New Jerusalem. I did want to point out new moon also is a feast day. Every new moon is a Sabbath day of rest. New moon literally means appointed day. We can look it up together if we have time. But yes, if you look into the Strong Concordance, whenever you see new moon, it's going to say appointed day, which obviously means a Sabbath day of rest. And I'm not going to get into the which one is the new moon, because I know many believe new moon is what we've been taught, which is the sliver moon or the dark moon, right? I stand in the understanding that the new moon is the full moon is what makes the most sense, not only biblically to me, but even like in the natural. Like it just makes sense that creation took place with brightness. Like when he created the luminaries, like he didn't start with a sliver moon. Does that make sense? Like I believe he created the two great lights. Two great lights to me signify full light, full sun and full moon. But anyhow, that's another topic. There's a study done by our brother Rob, Become Set Apart. He goes into depth, like there's no tomorrow. I believe that study is like 4 hours long. Take your time going through it, but I highly recommend it. Matthew 15, verse 17 through 19. Do you not see that whatever goes into the mouth, wait, let me see if I put this one right. No, this is not what I meant here. I meant Matthew 5. Hold on. Let me fix it down here. Give me 1 second, ladies. Matthew 5. This is Messiah speaking. Do not think that I came to abolish the law or the prophets. And I love going back to this because this just sums it up, right? I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. For truly I say to you, until heaven and earth pass away, not an iota, not a dot will pass from the law until all is accomplished. Last time I checked, heaven and earth are still here, very present. But anyhow, verse 19, therefore, whoever relaxes one of the least of these commandments and teaches others to do the same will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever does them and teaches them will be great in the kingdom of heaven. So let's make sure, sisters, that we are teaching others. Again, that he did not come to abolish the law. In Hebrew, that word abolish is lekayem, which literally says, I mean, not abolish, the word fulfill. The word fulfill in Hebrew is lekayem, which means to establish. So he came to establish it, not to nail it to the cross, right? And again, Messiah said in John 14:15, if you love me, you will keep my commandments. And this includes, again, remember the Sabbath day to keep it set apart. Revelations 14, verse 12, here's a call to endurance of the saints, those who keep the commandments of the Most High and their faith in Yahshua HaMashiach. So any questions so far? I'm going to go back to my slides. Unless you guys have any questions. Again, this brings it back to every Sabbath day, every commandment, every feast date. It's all about him. It's a matter of the heart. It's about obedience. And we know that we've been taught so many times that, or we look, I don't know about you ladies, but I remember going to church, even when I was younger. And we were always taught, like, look for the prophecies, the prophetic times, the signs of this, the end times, the prophecies, not understanding that literally it's like Isaiah 46, 9 and 10 says, remember, again, like remember the Sabbath day, right? Remember the former things of old, for I am, this is Haya, right? For I am the Most High. And there is no other. I am Elohim, and there is none like me, declaring the end from the beginning, and from ancient times things that are not yet done, saying, my counsel shall stand, and I will do all my pleasure. And why do I add this Bible verse? Because he declares the end from the beginning, which is exactly what he does through every appointed feast day, every appointed, every moed, every new moon, every sign in the heaven is a declaration he's done from the very beginning. We are just to remember the former things of old. Ladies and my sisters, remember them. That is what the Most High, our Father, is telling us to do. And taking it back to Exodus 12, verse 14. So this day shall be to you a memorial. This is speaking of Passover, by the way. And you shall keep it as a feast to the Adon throughout your generations. You shall keep it as a feast by an everlasting ordinance. I don't know how people read scriptures, because I don't understand how people can read this and do preachings on this and studies and not and still see it as something of the past. Like, to me, whenever I see forever, whenever I see everlasting, it means everlasting. It means forever. It means unto eternity and beyond. I'm just saying, right? The former things of old. And again, we are called to come out of her, my people, as Revelation 18:4 says. Come out of her, my people, understanding that we are currently living in spiritual Egypt. And according to the book of Revelation, we are living in the beast system, the Babylonian system. Therefore, the same way our ancestors were rescued from Egypt in a physical way, we will be rescued from Egypt in a very spiritual way. And again, obedience is key. The people in in Egypt, the Israelites in Egypt, including the mixed multitudes, right? The Egyptians that came with them. They didn't understand really why the Most High had commanded Moses to just put blood on their doorposts. They didn't understand it. They just did it. It's not so much for us to understand every sense of the word written as to what we are to do. We're just to obey because he asks us to do it, and we love him so much. It might not make sense to us, but we obey him, right? That's what we're called to do. We're called to obey him. If I understand that he's telling us to keep these as an everlasting covenant, as a perpetual memorial, I may not get why I'm doing it. I'm not going to lie. I may not get all of it, but I'm going to do it. He asked for me to do it. I'm going to do it. I understand that obedience is what got his people out of captivity. And it will happen again. Again, he declared the end from the beginning. And like Ecclesiastes says, there's nothing new under the sun. Whatever was, it shall be again. So what they went through is what we will do again. Paul later says that we should learn from the example of their disobedience. So let's learn from what they did wrong for us not to do and fall on the same trap like we read in Hebrews 4. And again, I have these graphics here because I believe that all of these, how do you call these? Oh my goodness. Well, yes, they're religions, but just different religions. At the end of the day, traditions of men. At the end of the day, he didn't come to build a religion or a Christian church or a Catholic church, which, by the way, Christianity encompasses all of those. He did not come to establish that. He came to establish a people in covenant. And there is a huge difference that people do not get. We are called to come out of her, come out of all of these traditions. And I put this Judaism symbolisms here because I don't know if you are like me. When I first came to the truth, I looked into Judaism because I thought they knew what we were supposed to do since they were the only ones doing it. Little did I know that they're also keeping traditions of men just as the Pharisees were in the days of Messiah. And a lot of these things are not even commanded in scriptures. Like, there's no such thing as a Star of David. When you look into it, you do find it in scriptures as the Star of Ramphan. And the Star of Ramphan is not a good thing. Look it up in Acts chapter 7, as well as in Amos, where Stephen quotes from. We also know that, for example, well, here we have a 7-branch menorah, but Judaism uses a 9-branch menorah, which is also not biblical. And there's so many other things like leaven that is added. For example, Passover, there's no need for a cedar. There is no need for all the extras. It's so crazy. I was just looking at the public library for a book for my little one, she's 5. I wanted a book at her age level to explain the Passover to her at her age level, because I have many books for my older ones, but not for her. And I checked out all these books on Passover that are for, like toddlers, young children. And when I go through all of them, they're all like just full of leaven. Because I'm like, I'm not gonna teach my like she's asking like what is that? I'm like, just skip that. We don't do none of that. There's no need for all these extra things. The Most High just wants us to keep it simple, guys. It's simple. And again, I'm probably gonna work on a study on Passover soon before Passover, but we'll get to that. All the little traditions that are not necessary. So let go of the leaven, like I said. Leaven, I believe, is sin. It's also traditions of men. And I put here examples of what leaven could signify. Leaven is religious traditions. For example, Rosh Hashanah, nowhere to be found in scriptures. That's a tradition from Judaism that comes from the Talmud. They believe that that's the head of the year. But when you look into scriptures, the Most High commands Moses to have the month of Abib or Nisan, which is March, April, so for that to be the head, like meaning the new year for us, right? Like I said, the cedar, our religious tradition, the Star of quote unquote David. We also have the great Gregorian pagan calendar, which is the calendar that we currently have, right? The January through December calendar, all named after pagan gods, same as the days of the week, all named after pagan gods. And this obviously also includes the Jewish calendar. And why do I say this? Because that calendar is not really following his luminaries. So again, if you don't have understanding on this and you don't know where to begin, don't go crazy. I did recommend a study by Become Set Apart, but if this is still too much, just start with what you have. Start with your heart. If Saturday Sabbath is what you know, I started on a Saturday Sabbath. Is that what you know? Then you do that until the Most High leads you otherwise. But what I do always encourage you is to ask Him, please. Don't stay where you are because you're going to stay comfortable. Ask Him to lead you to all truth, and I promise you that He will. We may not arrive to all the conclusion of the matter in this life, in this realm, but at least He sees that we are trying to seek His guidance and to do things right by Him. That's my only advice that I have. I also have us 11 pagan holidays and pagan traditions. Again, there's no commandment or indication for us to observe any of these things, and yet we have been taught to prioritize these things over the Most High's feasts, which are His, which are for Him, indicate and all go back to Him, foreshadows all about Messiah. But yet we are stuck, or we're stuck in traditions of men by celebrating pagan holidays and saying we're going to do it for Him, right? No, let go of that leaven. Another big one that the Most High has been revealing to me, and it's huge, is unforgiveness in the heart and strives within the brethren, within the body of Messiah, within your family members. That is leaven, my sisters. I know it's a tough one, but let go of it. All that divisiveness, all that, that's not from the Most High. All of the law hangs from two commandments, which is to love Him and to love our neighbor. And we're not able to do those two, then everything else is in vain and is vague. And we have the Most High even speaks through one of the prophets. I want to say it's Amos or Micah. I think it's Amos, where he says to them, I hate and I detest your feasts. And to me, when I read that, I was like, oh my gosh, like it hit to my core, because it only shows how you could be doing all these things and the Most High will tell you, I hate it. I vomit it. Like, I don't like it. I don't accept it, though you think you're doing it for Him and doing it correctly. So let's check our hearts. Let's ask Him to check our hearts. And as Passover approaches, yes, you want to do the things, as written in scriptures, checking the leaven in our homes and whatnot. But most importantly, is the leaven in our hearts. So let's let's check inwardly that there's no leaven in our hearts, because that's what matters. Again, observing and doing the works, but no transformation of the heart is leaven. That is leaven. That is literally what the Pharisees were doing. So let's make sure we're not doing that and falling in that trap. and quickly, I just want to know, I want to go over excuses that people come up to when you speak on the feast. They'll say, oh, but Paul said this. And I'm going to grab like 3 quick precepts to break down and show you how that is completely taken out of context and how that is not biblical at all. So many say that the biblical holidays are strictly an Old Testament thing, like I said, and not needed after Messiah came. Many go to Paul's letters, but if you study in context, Paul didn't think so and expressly told believers, yes, even non-Jewish ones, to keep the feasts as he himself kept them. And why do I say this? Because Paul wrote to the Gentile churches who were Gentile at the beginning, right? But they were not Jewish people. They were, again, a Gentile nation or different Gentile nations. So let's see what he says. We find in 1 Corinthians 5:8, therefore purge out the old leaven, that you may be a new lump, since you truly are unleavened. For indeed Messiah, our Passover, was sacrificed for us. Therefore let us keep the feast, not with old leaven, nor with the leaven of malice and wickedness, but with the unleavened bread of sincerity and truth. So again, he's speaking of something very spiritual. Purge out the old leaven and make sure you are unleavened, right? Which is what in an essence I was trying to tell you, ladies. However, we do see that he mentions Messiah being the Passover. But what does he say on verse 8? Therefore, connecting that to the Passover. Therefore, let us keep the feast. Let us keep the appointed time, not with old leaven, nor with the leaven of malice and wickedness, but with the unleavened bread of sincerity and truth. And again, Paul was writing to the nation or the city of Corinth, which was a Greek nation. They were not Israelites. So that sums that one up. So he was addressing, like I said, the first Greek group of believers from Corinth. His target audience was not Jewish people or those living in Israel, and you don't have to meet those descriptions to celebrate them. This is a New Testament passage telling us to keep the feast. Specifically in this precept, the feast of the Passover. We also have Galatians 4, verses 8 through 11. Galatians is another good book to study. I'm probably going to do a short study on that one, probably beginning next week. I'll let you ladies know if you guys want to join. So Galatians 4, verses 8 through 11. But then indeed, when you did not know the Most High, you served those which by nature are not gods. So right off the bat, I want to tell you this. He's talking about pagan gods here. You serve those which by nature are not gods, okay? Idols. This is what he's saying. Now pay attention to the wording. But now, after you have known the Most High, or rather are known by him, how is it that you turn again to the weak and beggarly elements to which you desire again to be in bondage? So verse 10 has to do with this, not with this Most High. Are you understanding? Verse 10, you observe days and months and seasons and years. I am afraid for you, lest I have labored for you in vain. A lot of people will come and tell you, Paul said that you're observing these things in vain. And he was talking to a people that was going back to idolatry. That's exactly what that means when you read it in context. Again, he was speaking about pagan holidays, like of Celtic Greek origin, to which certain believers of Corinth were returning to. Verse 8 clearly shows a return to pagan worship, not his holy appointed times, which our fathers said are to be kept, again, forever. And we also have Colossians 2, 16 through 17. So let no one judge you in food or in drink or regarding a festival or a new moon or Sabbaths, which are a shadow of things to come, but the substance is of Christ. And I want to make an observation here that whenever you see food in scriptures referenced by any righteous man or woman, they did not consider unclean foods to be food, point blank. And you can see that because when Peter was given the vision with the unclean animals, he clearly manifested and said, what are you telling me? This is unclean. So they know what's clean and unclean. I wanted to point that out. Nothing from the old has been done away with. So again, let no one judge you regarding a festival, which a festival is also a feast. It's the same word. New moon or Sabbath, which encompasses all of the same things, right? They're all Shabbats. They're all Sabbath days. So it's clear when you read in the correct context that Paul was telling believers not to allow others outside the faith to judge them on their compliance to his commandments, especially since he was addressing a non-Jewish crowd, meaning they were not bloodline Israelites. So imagine this. It's like us today observing the feast days. It's like if he would be speaking to us today that we are nothing to do with what people believe to be Israelites, right? And he was telling them, don't let them judge you for you keeping the feast days. In other words, right? Especially, again, but we know throughout his letters, he stated again and again that if you are in Messiah, you are now Israel and heirs of the same promise. And you see that throughout. You see that in Ephesians, you see that in Romans, you see that in Galatians and Colossians, everywhere. From all of his letters, you see it. Lastly, from Paul, we have Ephesians 3, 5 through 6. And I used the amplified version here because I liked the way it read better. So again, this mystery was never disclosed to human beings in past generations, as it has now been revealed to his holy apostles, consecrated messengers, and prophets by the Ruach HaKodesh, right? By his Holy Spirit. Verse 6, it is this, that the Gentiles are now to be fellow heirs with the Jews, members of the same body, and joint partakers, sharing in the same divine promise in Christ through their acceptance of the glad tidings, the gospel. So that makes it so clear that when you are a Gentile believer, you come to be co-heir and joint partaker of the whole house of Israel. So you become Israel. And that is the mystery Paul was trying to reveal. So again, these are my feasts. And again, he says, forever. These are his feasts. They're not ours. So while we can honor him through other means as well, we shouldn't neglect that he asked us to observe these things. These times. The problem with the church today is that we want to worship him how we want, not how he asked us to, which is the exact same thing the Israelites did over and over again, which led them to strange worship. And we see that with Nadab and Abihu. And that's in Leviticus 10:1. The Nadab and Abihu, the sons of Aaron, each took his censer and put fire in it, put incense on it, and offered profane fire before the Adon, which he did not command them to do. So we see that when we do things that he didn't command us to do, even though we're saying, oh, we're doing this to honor him. Like so many people say, I celebrate Christmas because I honor him this way. I know it's not about him. I know it's a pagan holiday or whatnot, but I do it for him. Let's check our hearts really that we don't fall in the trap of Nadab and Abihu. Because if he hasn't commanded you to do those things, then let's go back to scriptures and see what he did command us to do, because he has his way that he wants us to worship him. It's not how we want, it's how he wants. And again, we should be doers of the word. Most of us have had excuse after excuse for why we don't actually need to keep scriptures instructions. Life is too short to live in half-hearted compromise. And if abundant life comes through the Messiah, shouldn't we align ourselves with his lifestyle, at least to the best of our ability, like I was saying before, right? Our Father deserves more than just our verbal praise. He desires that we show our faith by our actions. Celebrating a few times a year is a doable and is a joy-filled way to do that. So joyful. And again, it's like Abba throws a big party and we are invited. It's all about celebrating him. And I put some graphics here. This one representing Passover, the Passover meal, which, yes, it is in the evening before the Sabbath, which is the first day of unleavened bread. Then we have unleavened bread over here. We have, let me see, this represents Shavuot. I probably put this one for the last day of unleavened bread. Feast of Trumpets, Feast of Tabernacles over here. Maybe this one is Day of Atonement, not sure. And Feast of Trumpets, I don't know. The Great Eighth Day. No, this one is the Great Eighth Day. And this would be representing of the Day of Judgment. Yes. So again, we are invited to all of them, including the weekly Sabbaths. And again, these are his holy days, steps into his plan of salvation. You find the bulk of it in Leviticus 23. And we know again that he is the Passover lamb. He is the sinless, the bread of life, which is without sin or unleavened bread. He gave us his Holy Spirit through the first fruits of his harvest. The Feast of Trumpets is when he comes back, the Day of Atonement, when he comes to remove the sin, the Day of Judgment. The Feast of Tabernacles is when he comes and reigns over the earth during the millennial reign. The great eighth day is salvation extended to all humanity because we move on to going on to eternity with him. So in conclusion, the set apart feasts are holy convocations or sacred assemblies that proclaim that his glory has filled the earth. Now that we are conquerors because we trusted in his plan, and we have to do nothing else than to act and believe that his truth sets us free. Our Messiah came to reaffirm what happened in Egypt. He is our Passover lamb, our manna or unleavened bread, whose example is our way to follow. He's the plan, the route to find the way back to righteousness and come back home, not only physically, but also spiritually. These are our Father's special appointments with his beloved. Those who claim to be co-heirs in the new covenant should also hold to the promises found in the new covenant, that the Most High will write his law, including his Moedim, upon our hearts. We find that in Jeremiah 31 through 33, Hebrews 8:10, as well as Ezekiel 36:27. Remember, the new covenant is not really new, it's renewed because it's under Messiah being the high priest. But he is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And again, if your father gives you a special appointment, wouldn't you want to go and meet him at that special appointment? Not when you want to, but when he wants to. So I pray this study has blessed you. I pray that you are able to truly observe. If you've never done any of this, that at least you begin to observe, that at least you have the desire to become one with him, become one with Messiah during these times, and share with others. There are times of joy. If you don't know what to do, begin with just worshiping him. Maybe you're by yourself in your home, or you have your children, or invite a friend. I don't know, like, listen, I've never done this, but I heard where to do this, so let's worship, let's read some scripture, and let's break some bread. That's what Messiah literally would do, break bread with his disciples and feast. Hey, we are Hispanic over here, so we like to pachanga, we put some live music, and we like to dance it out. Whatever it is, just rejoice on his day. You can pray. It's not a day for you to mourn. It's not a day for you to even fast. It's a day for you to rejoice. I try my very best not to ever fast during a Sabbath day, unless I'm doing a fast that is longer than a week. Of course, then I'll be fasting, but I try to not use Sabbath days for fasting because they're days of rejoicing and feasting. The only one, with the exception again of Day of Atonement, that day you fast. That is mandatory. But again, I pray this has blessed you. If you have any further questions, feel free to reach out to me. I would gladly help you, walk you through this step by step, to the best of my ability. And the only thing I ask is that you pay it forward. The same way you receive today, the same way you share with others. Share this message with others. Maybe not this recording. You share it with yourself. I mean, share it in your own words to someone else, take some notes and share. Make some posts on social media. I don't know, however the Holy Spirit leads you. And let's make his word trend, because the time is at hand and his bride should be getting ready and getting others ready, inviting others to the wedding supper. So again, may Abba Baruch you. And we will be doing more studies. I'll let you know when the next study is ready, like the specifics for Passover and whatnot. I will definitely be doing that one, but we will be in touch for sure. May Abba Baruch you all and bless you. Mat Shalom.